Well, good morning, everyone, and thank you for the beautiful and enthusiastic and thoughtful way that you have already engaged in celebrating Jesus' resurrection this morning. And I want to begin simply by asking like an obvious question. What is the resurrection to you? I know what you're thinking. Jim, look, buddy, we got the kids up, we got dressed, I got my jacket on. Why are you asking me what the resurrection is to me? We're here, obviously, right? Thank you. I'm speechless. Thank you. What was the question? Oh, yes, what is the resurrection to you? It's a question worth asking at a deeper level. You know, for some people, about 1 out of 3 Americans, the resurrection of Jesus is just wishful thinking. That is, their minds and spirits and their experiences of life have kind of structured their view of reality that the only thing that really exists is what we can see and measure and repeat. And there really is no room for a resurrection. And quite frankly, they may think that it's simply a crutch to help people walk through a very difficult time. And that might really be where you are today because you're here as a favor to a friend or a family member. But for you, your struggle is to believe that it could be true. And we respect that, and we're really glad that you're a part of our service today. On the other hand, some of us, when we think about the resurrection, it's simply hopeful information. That is, we celebrate the resurrection of Jesus. We're always present on Easter. It's something that we celebrate and we're glad about, and we hope that one day, maybe when I die, that I'll be resurrected along with Jesus and get to spend eternity with him and with my family members that I've lost. But as it simply comes to like everyday living, you struggle with how do I apply the power and the reality of the resurrection to my daily life? And this morning, what I want to submit to you is that there is something about the quality of the resurrection that Jesus wants us to apply daily through every experience, through every challenge that we face. So, if I can show you that the resurrection of Jesus is indeed the power to transform your every experience of death and loss or failure or an ending into a new kind of life, would you really be interested? Would you want to know, like the Apostle Paul writes in Philippians chapter 3, verse 10, I really want to know the power of Jesus' resurrection. Well, today, that's what I hope I can share with you. And that when you walk out today, you will have a renewed sense of how Jesus' resurrection can help you through life, to live not just the life you're currently living, but a life that is new and full of hope and promise. Now, in the last week of Jesus' life, he gathered his disciples together, and much of what he said, he was trying to prepare them for what was to come. And in John chapter 12, verses 23 and 24, we read a very short, simple, and yet profound parable that Jesus teaches that helps us understand how the power of the resurrection can create newness and a future for us no matter what we're experiencing. Here's what Jesus says. Now the time has come for the Son of Man to enter into his glory. I want to stop here for a second. The opening song that we sang this morning was All for Your Glory. Now in the Gospel of John, John always equates Jesus' glory and his glorification with his crucifixion. And what Jesus is saying here, the time has now come for my crucifixion. And if you stop and think about it, the one thing that causes us to praise Jesus, to want to give him glory, is because of his sacrificial death that demonstrated the unconditional love of God and his heart to forgive every one of us in Jesus' death. So that's what he's talking about. He's talking about now his crucifixion. I tell you the truth, unless a kernel of wheat is planted in the soil and dies, it remains alone. But its death will produce many new kernels, a plentiful harvest of new lives. Now, what is Jesus trying to communicate to his disciples and to disciples today? And here it is. He first uses this illustration to point out that some parts of the natural world, in some parts of the natural world, death is a prerequisite for a fruitful life. While it appears that when you bury the seed in the ground and you cover it over, that it's dead and gone. And yet it is only when that seed is planted in that fertile soil that it becomes the catalyst for all of this new life. And Jesus is saying, in some parts of the natural world, and especially in your spiritual and emotional and physical life, death has the opportunity, it can be a catalyst for something that is brand new. Here's the second thing he says. He also reveals that the birth of new life is a process. That is, the plant just doesn't poof and all of a sudden everything is blooming and there are new seeds around. It is a process. But we live in a world that values instantaneous gratification. We can Google things and get an answer to almost any question. We can pop our dinners in the microwave and have it ready in seconds. Now, this kind of comes home to roost in my mind. My wife, Robin, thinks she's really funny. And she is, but it comes out in a strange way. So like on some mornings, I'll say, honey, would you make me a cup of coffee? And she goes, poof, you're a cup of coffee. I'm going, no, that's not what I was asking, all right? To enjoy my cup of coffee, it's a process. That is, I have to put water in the coffee maker and get out the filter and then put the grounds in there and then I touch brew. And after a little bit, then I get to enjoy my coffee, which I drown in hazelnut creamer because I don't like the coffee taste all that much. And so it is a process for that to take place. And Jesus is saying, whenever we experience death or loss or ending, new birth is possible, but it's a process. And then I do believe that Jesus' parable gives us a clue as to why we struggle to apply the power of his resurrection. And here it is. At Easter, we focus on Jesus' resurrection, rightfully so. This is Easter Sunday morning, but we stop short of seeing and understanding how the resurrection fits into the larger story of rebirth and renewal. I've been reading a book by a wonderful writer by the name of Ronald Rolheiser. The name of the book is Holy Longing. And he's the one who helped me understand not only the power, simply the resurrection, but the larger Easter story that really is what leads indeed to new life. So what I want to do is I want to zoom out for just a few moments and I want to share with you the larger story of rebirth and renewal from the perspective of the disciples who experienced it firsthand. And the reason why this is important is because it was the transformation of the disciples from somewhat being cowards, and when Jesus died on Good Friday, running and hiding for fear of their life, and yet weeks later, they are out publicly declaring and telling the world that Jesus has been raised, even when they are threatened with prison or worse. And now as we look back in history, that's one of the reasons why I believe in the resurrection is because something happened to those disciples that literally changed them and the way they were living. And the only thing that makes sense to me is that they not only saw the resurrected Jesus, but they went through a process that led to their growth and renewal and rebirth as followers of Jesus. So here it is. Here's the larger story. It begins on Good Friday. And it is the experience of real death and loss. The disciples lose their friend, their mentor, their Messiah, their hope and dream of a new political heyday for Israel, and their place in it It was a day of death and loss and endings. But then Easter comes. Easter Sunday morning, resurrection and the rebirth of hope and a future for them. Now here's the thing, Jesus is not just resuscitated. He is resurrected. There's a different quality to his life. In fact, some of the disciples don't recognize him immediately. His life is deeper, richer, transformed in some new way. But then after Easter, there's a period of 40 days that the New Testament text revealed to us. And it's a time in which they had to grapple with the past and grieve the fact that things were gonna be different and then begin to adjust to the new. When the male disciples first heard that Jesus had been resurrected, they said, "Oh, that's nonsense. That can't possibly have happened." And yet, they began to experience the risen Jesus. Thomas wasn't around when Jesus made his first appearance to the disciples, and he said, "Hey, listen, until I can put my hands in Jesus' nail scars, I'm not believing." And about 8 days later, he got to do that. In Acts chapter 1, verse 3, there's a wonderful little verse that kind of depicts what was going on in those 40 days that Luke records for us. And here's what he writes. During the 40 days after Jesus suffered and died, he appeared to the apostles from time to time, and he proved to them in many ways that he was actually alive. And he talked to them about the kingdom of God. Do you see what's going on here? He had to prove to them that he truly was alive. They had to adjust to the fact that, well, it's different, but hey, he really can be alive. And now he's talking to them about the kingdom of God that is now coming, that they have the opportunity to live in God's kingdom now under God's gracious reign and guidance, and Jesus is gonna be with them. They were in this period of having to adjust to what was coming next. And then after the 40 days is a period of ascension. In fact, it was the time after one of the conversations when Jesus said, "Hey, I want to give you a kind of like a final command. One of these days when the Spirit comes upon you, you're going to receive power and you'll be my witnesses in Jerusalem, Judea, Samaria, and the rest of the world." And guess what? It happened. And he comes, before that happens, he is risen, he ascends. And in his ascension, those disciples have to do something really important. They have to let go of the past and refuse to cling to it and really open their hearts and lives to the new thing, which would be Pentecost. And at Pentecost, that is when they receive the Spirit. The Holy Spirit falls upon them, and when it does, it empowers them to live out this new life that he was calling them to. That's the story, the larger Easter story of transformation and rebirth in the lives of these disciples. So here's what I want you to begin to grasp and to process in your own mind. Jesus' teaching, death, and resurrection revealed the Easter promise that now for every death, every ending, every loss, there is the possibility of new life. Now, if I were to take this experience of the disciples and kind of pulled out the proper names of those dates and events, it would leave what I believe are some important spiritual and emotional principles. And it would be what I would call the Easter pathway from death and loss to rebirth and renewal. And so here's how I would simply name the principles. You have to always begin by naming your deaths. And the disciples had to do that. There was real loss and real consequences, and it could not be undone. And we experience death and loss and endings that have real consequences, and we can't turn back the clock and undo them. But after we name our deaths, like the disciples, we can claim new births, the possibility that things can be different. We can't resuscitate the past, but we can have a resurrected idea of a new hope, a new calling, a new purpose in our life. And our resurrected experience can be deeper and richer and more meaningful than our past. The third thing we have to do is we have to then be willing to lean into our muddle. Now, this is not the definition from the dictionary of the word muddle, but this is mine. What muddle means is it means the mud in the middle of stuff. And if you've ever lost someone or lost a marriage or lost a job or had an ending of something that you didn't want to end, you're stuck in the middle and you're having to grieve what's past and what is not gonna happen anymore, but then you're really called and you're pulled into the next chapter and where you're going, and you're kind of stuck in the muddle of it. But you have to lean into it and wrestle in it. You have to muddle wrestle, and so you can really walk through this. And then after that, though, you get to the end of your period in the muddle, and then you have to refuse to cling to the old. That is, you have to be willing to let it go. And there are a lot of people who really struggle with letting some of their deaths and losses go. And if you don't let it go, however, it will soon come to define you as a person. And so after you're in the muddle for a while, then you have to be willing to refuse to cling, and you have to be willing to let it go. And then only though are you able and willing to receive the new spirit, the spirit that will inspire you, that will breathe life into you and empower you for your new calling or your new chapter or your new career or new relationship. Whatever the case might be, that's when the transformation kind of culminates, when you have this new spirit for the new. And here's the thing. I do believe that the Easter pathway is the secret to applying the power of Jesus' resurrection in your daily life and experiencing the joy and abundance that Christ came to give. And maybe you've never thought of this pathway before, and many of you perhaps have been on it. Sometimes when you're driving along on a road or something and you've kind of been in your own head, and you go, oh, I'm on 121. I didn't realize I was there. But many of you have kind of been on this. Maybe you didn't articulate it this way, but this is a part of our life and our faith. But the reason why it's so important is because in this life, we are going to experience many deaths and losses and endings. And many of you do not have to be reminded of that. It's very clear to you that you have experienced those things in your life. But for those of you who haven't, or for those of you who have experienced them but you haven't really been able to name them, I want to walk us through some of the things that we lose, some of the things that die in our lives. The first one is this, and the obvious one, the death of relationships through the loss of life or love. The unrelenting absence of a beloved person's presence or voice or touch is a source of some of life's most unbearable pain. Whether it's a parent or a spouse or, heaven forbid, a child, a boyfriend or a girlfriend. I can't tell you how many times when I'm driving from my home to work, I'm thinking about calls I need to make along the way. I really wish I could call my dad. He passed away about 12 and a half years ago. And I long to hear him say, "Hey, Jimbo." That's what he called me. "Hey, Jimbo." That's the way he greeted me. And I haven't heard that for 12 and a half years. Some of you, with great hope and great intention, said "I do" to one another. But with the passing of time, what has happened, one or both of you have said, "Now, I'm done." And you've lost the most important relationship in your life. We have the death of relationships. And they're difficult and they're hard. The second thing is we experience the loss of childhood innocence through early deprivation or betrayal. Being deprived of loving time and attention and the blessing of a parent stunts our souls. On the other hand, being betrayed emotionally or physically or sexually by someone who is meant to be our protector scars our tender souls, and sometimes beyond recognition. We experience the ending of life seasons through the passing of time. You know, when the electricity of the honeymoon dissipates and it's gone and you fall out of love, it feels like what? Your marriage is over and ending. When your nest empties and your parental wisdom is no longer appreciated, but your financial support is, your season of active parenting is coming to an end. And some of you have taken your last child to college this year. You know what I'm talking. That is a loss. It's a change. And then when your brain says yes, but your body says no, and the world around you pays you less and less attention, you may realize that you have lost your youth because our world values youth. This was brought home to me in ways I really never expected. Just Friday evening, after our Good Friday service, Rob and I decided to get away for kind of just a romantic getaway to rest and relax and recuperate, you know, for a busy weekend. And as we were pulling out of the driveway, she said to me, honey, don't forget, and don't let me forget to get my yarn and my crochet needles. I went, what? It's come to this? My grandmother crocheted. And now I'm going away on a romantic night away, and my wife wants her yarn. I mean, it's what... Okay, it happens. And then we experience the death of our dreams. To be human is to dream. And with the help of Walt Disney and our day, our dreams are on steroids. We dream about what we can become. An astronaut, a teacher, the president, a policeman, a TikTok influencer. We dream about what our lives will look like. We'll have a happy marriage and 2.5 kids and 1.5 pets, and we live on a cul-de-sac with really nice neighbors. And we dream about what we can accomplish. The corner office in the C-suite, owning our own business, being independently wealthy where we have a lake, house that we can go to on the weekends. But in reality, we're stuck in a job we don't like, and we're in a hard marriage, and our kids are struggling, and we're working for the man, and we're living month to month. And as a result, all of our dreams are on life support, right? Here's the kicker. And here is the thing that must be grasped if you're going to experience the power of the resurrection. It's how we respond to the deaths and losses that we experience that will determine, on the one hand, if we live lives of quiet desperation or toxic coping or increasing bitterness, or on the other hand, life of joy that is resolute and enduring. How we respond to loss, death, endings, setbacks will determine our future. Now, I've shared with you this process. Maybe you've never articulated it before. Maybe you've kind of been on it. You recognize some of it, but it's not really going to come into clarity for you until you really see how it's lived out in someone's life. And that's why I think you'll really appreciate Natalie's story. Take a look.
I was invited to come to a Christmas party right after college on the University of Minnesota campus, and I had to drive, I think, 20 minutes or so to get to the party that night. So I called my girlfriend who was hosting, and I said, I'm not getting dressed if there's not one cute guy there. And she kind of said that she looked around the room and she was like, yep, there's one. And so that one ended up being Dan, and he opened the door, and there he was. I just loved his smile, his warmth, just his unassuming nature, just extremely down to earth, just kind of selfless and generous and friendly and fun.
Hey, I'm Dan.
And I'm Natalie. And we're getting married on 9/10/11.
A month before our wedding, Dan's dad was mowing the lawn at age 54 and passed away in that moment from a massive heart attack, and rocked everybody's world, obviously, but along with his mom and his family, we decided to move forward with the wedding a month later. And it was just bittersweet all around, just a wonderful day, but obviously something huge missing. I don't know if, that grief and that moment was ever fully processed with him, the loss of his dad. And me as a young new wife, I don't think I really knew how to point him into the right resources or, I did the best I could to support him with the knowledge that I had, but we just kind of kept going, one foot in front of the other, and probably pushed it down more than we should have.
Gotcha.
It was shortly after our firstborn son, Rory, was born in 2014 that I noticed some unhealthy habits with Dan and his use of alcohol. We had always drank alcohol in a way that I thought was healthy, like 20-somethings do. We went to happy hours and we were in a wine club and just kind of like hung out with friends, and it never crossed my mind that it was an issue at all, ever. It wasn't like what you see in the movies, and it wasn't anything traumatic really in that moment, and nothing, huge or rock bottom happened. So we've learned a lot about, what that can look like and the faces of it and the unexpected people that might be dealing with it. Secrets can kill us. They really can, and they can consume us. And when we don't speak about them, we don't get the help that we need. We don't get the support that we need. What he went through is something a lot of people go through. And if only he could have heard a story similar to this, maybe that could have resonated and pointed us in a better direction. Dan passed away unexpectedly in December of 2020. Rory, my oldest son, was in kindergarten, and Dempsey was 3. I know that that was not who he was, and I definitely agree that it is not a character flaw, but alcoholism is a disease. And while I wish I knew what I know now, I just feel a peace that surpasses understanding. We've had the opportunity to experience so much new life in just so many ways within our community, our neighborhood, our school. It's amazing how God can use that for you to dream up a new dream. And I'm just waiting in anticipation to see what our new dream is. Even though you might have a plan for your life, his is always better, even if you don't know. And you can't just kind of trust God, I guess. You can't be like, oh yeah, he's got it, but oh wait, he might not have that little part. I've learned you have to just completely surrender. Like, you have to 100% trust, and it's just been a continuous flow of God's goodness every single day for all of us.
We've had the privilege of watching Natalie walk through the Easter pathway of losing her husband and now God restoring and renewing her life. She's on our staff here. And we've grown to love her and appreciate her journey and the way she is leading us through her incredible example. So let me ask you, where are you on the Easter pathway of rebirth and renewal in your life? You don't have to look at this very long probably to recognize where you are. Some of you, many of you perhaps, have experienced more loss than anyone should have to experience. And yet you've traveled this pathway, maybe not just once, but several times along the way, and you can honestly say that your life is deeper and richer and more meaningful because you've experienced the rebirth and the renewal that comes even through loss and endings. You know, quite frankly, that is my experience. I've lived on this pathway. When my father was 26 years old and my mom was 5 months pregnant with me, he was in a horrific oil field accident that essentially blew away the lower part of his body. And he spent the next 56 years of his life as an amputee with a body that was incredibly scarred. And yet, because my mom and my dad believed in the power of the resurrection, they claimed the promise of life, and they went through the muddle, and they let that experience go, and they accepted the Spirit of Christ to renew their lives. And I grew up in a home where I knew that I was unconditionally loved. There was incredible gratitude to God for his faithfulness. And I'll never forget when my dad was in his 50s, we were having a conversation. And he said, "Son, I want you to know something." He said, "You know, that accident was probably the best thing that could have ever happened to me. I wouldn't change anything because the direction of my life in that moment was the wrong one. And God has used that to transform my life." It's a hard, hard road, but a road that left him and my mom and me and my sister with a deeper, richer, more meaningful life. And you can experience that too when you are on this pathway. But the truth of the matter is that it's easy to live in a state of denial about our deaths and our losses, and we're not willing to get on that pathway to ever begin to name our deaths. And sometimes once we get on it, we get stuck at different places and at different stages. And so because in a crowd like this, I know that we are in different places and in different stages, I can't think of a better time than Easter Sunday morning than for each of us to start down this pathway or to get unstuck on this pathway. And so here's what I'd like to do. I'd like to lead you all in like a guided prayer time as we kind of pray and process through this together. So if it'd be okay with you, if you wouldn't mind, if we could just close our eyes and bow our heads. And I'm gonna close my eyes and bow my head. I'm not gonna be looking around at all. Here's what I wanna encourage you to do. If you can, just put both feet on the floor so you feel grounded, and lay your hands in your lap, open. And take some slow breaths in and out. You know, our bodies and minds and spirits are connected. And when we do things physically at times, it communicates things to our mind and heart and spirit. And when you breathe slowly in and out, you are telling your mind it's safe. You're in God's presence. And now as you are in touch with the sense of God's presence here, I want to encourage you to picture in your mind the whiteboard of your life. And I want you to pick up a dry erase marker, and I want you to write out, perhaps for the first time, or maybe it's the easiest thing you can do, and write out a death or a loss or an ending that you have yet to process on the Easter pathway. Most of you won't need a lot of prompting because it is right there, top of mind. And now, after having written that out, I want you to, in your mind, hand that dry erase marker to Jesus and let him write a new dream, a new future, a new life. And maybe in this moment you could claim it and say, "Yes, Lord." Some of you are there and you're being pulled by the past and a loss and a failing, and you have a sense of where God's calling you and where he's leading you, but you are stuck in the muddle. And maybe just in this moment, as an expression to God, you just want to lean forward in your chair just a bit to let him know you're not going to avoid the muddle. You're going to be in it. You're going to lean into it. You're going to learn from it. You're going to adjust to it. And then some of you, you've been in the muddle for a long time. You've not been able to let go of the loss of your marriage or the loss of your innocence that happened 40 years ago. You haven't been able to let go of being let go from your job or career unjustly. But in this moment, would it be possible that you could refuse to cling to it anymore? And if you're willing now to let it go, just as your hands are on your lap, if you just want to raise them up as an expression to God that you're going to let those things go. You're going to refuse to cling to the past so you can fully face into your future. And now once you have refused to cling, you can put your hands in your lap and just have your palms up. Maybe this is the moment that you say and pray, oh, Father, I need your Spirit. Breathe into me new life and new hope and new courage to live the life you're calling me to. Empower me to be your witness where I live, work, and play. Empower me to be the parent I need to be, or the coworker, whatever the case might be. Invite the Spirit of Jesus into your life. Father, you've been transforming lives from the very beginning. And you did it so beautifully in the lives of those disciples, and their transformation has filtered down to us today. And we are here today because of the power of the Easter pathway and the power of your resurrection. So, Father, on this day, may we mark it down that our lives are now being transformed as never before because of your grace and love and the power of your resurrection. In Jesus' name, amen.